You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm here with Christie Currie, who runs marketing for a startup in the real estate space, which is pretty cool. I actually learned about them as a result of seeing one of their ads, which proves that advertising actually works, in case you didn't know. So, Christine, for those folks who aren't familiar with reAlpha, what's the origin story and how has it evolved since you've been involved?
Yeah. So the tweet pitch for reAlpha would kind of be that we're the Robin Hood of Airbnb. You know, everything nowadays, you have to get it across really quickly. So that's how people easily conceptualize what we are. We're about a year old now, founded by serial entrepreneur, past NASDAQ founder. His name is Gary Devanor. He's a techie. And the origin story of reAlpha is actually that Gary got a call from a friend who wanted to invest in an Airbnb property. But she didn't have the money or the liquidity for a 25% down payment. So she was essentially asking him, hey, Gary, can I have a loan or can you help me find a solution? Like I said, he's a techie, so he immediately started thinking of a solution. And that solution has come to become reAlpha. And what we do is we use technology to identify and acquire the best properties for Airbnb, so the most lucrative investment opportunities. But then our mission is to democratize the ability for people to invest in this real estate. So what we then do is we have a Robinhood-like app where we allow people to buy fractional shares into the properties. And so really my role here has been in figuring out how do we explain this massive opportunity, this massive brand, and how do we create kind of a lifestyle community brand around it. How do we make it a powerful message for consumers who would want to invest in it? In today's day and age, people are investing in all kinds of things. So how do we make, real assets attractive again? And that's really what my day-to-day is about.
That's cool. So it sounds like it's a very educational pitch at this point, because obviously it's such a new concept that you probably have to spend some portion of the marketing pitch educating people on the fact that you can even do this, right? Now, the form of investment that this is going out under is I guess called Reg A. So some people may not be familiar with that either. So maybe it'd be useful for you to sort of talk about how that framework allows you to go out and market it.
Yeah. So a big reason why this hasn't been done before is because the regulations have not allowed it to become, to be possible. But in, especially under Obama and the Jobs Act, crowdfunding, Regulation A, all of these things came to light where it actually allowed people, everyday investors, to invest into companies, into products, into startups that they believed in. And that has really been a changing landscape over the years. But for us, we both use this kind of crowdfunding Regulation A model to, number one, allow people to invest into our properties directly on the app. It's kind of the method behind the scenes. But number two, we've taken, our mission of democratization a step further, and we're actually running one of these Regulation A mini IPOs, you could think of it, at the company level. And so what that's allowing is people who are interested in our company and what we're doing and our mission, people who want to become investors on the app and specific properties can actually also become investors in the company itself. So that was kind of a strategic decision of we need to acquire a lot of homes. We want to start building a community, and we're going to have, more demand than we have supply of homes. So can we actually allow people to become shareholders, the people who are going to be our super fans in the company, rather than just going to, traditional private equity venture capital for that initial funding to buy properties. So we're using Regulation A on multiple levels. And it's really exciting to have, the people who are going to be our core consumers actually be shareholders in the company as well.
Right. That is sort of cool. Once the properties have been acquired, do you guys end up essentially being the property managers and managing the listings on the Airbnbs or VRBOs for that matter?
Yes. Yeah. So we identify the property, we put it on the app for the financing, allowing people to buy into the other 49%. So that's one thing. We'll maintain 51% ownership as a company. And that is partially what is hedging the risk against these individual investors. It's what allows this fractional ownership to happen. And so we'll put the other 49% equity for the property on the app. For as little as $2,500, someone can buy into that equity. We then manage the property, list it on Airbnb, your percentage ownership. You'll have the monthly revenue distributed back to you as quarterly dividends. You'll benefit from any appreciation in the property that it experiences. And then, in terms of community and actually allowing our consumers to be part of our brand and really kind of feel connected to it and feel connected to their investment, we're actually allowing people who invest either at the company level or at the property level to go and stay in their properties. So that's kind of another angle to it, is this kind of this timeshare type of model, go and experience your investment.
Right. So yeah, what wasn't clear to me from the initial ad, right, which you've now made clear, is that when the person is investing in a specific, fractional piece of real estate, they're doing it at a specific location and address, right? It wasn't. I initially thought it was more pooled, right, where it was sort of more like a mutual fund, where you would go in and end up with, potentially dozens or hundreds of properties, more like a REIT, right? So
yeah, so
it's much more. Yeah, it's much more niche than that, which is sort of cool.
Yeah, we're allowing it to be both right now. So right now, if you're investing in the company, you're investing kind of in like our REIT, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
You're investing in all properties that we're going to own.
Yeah.
And then we'll also allow you the opportunity to say, hey, I want to specifically have a stake in this property in Miami or this property in Denver, because I want access to it. And, I want to have that experience. So you get the benefit of both right now,
right,
available to you.
If a person has a specific set of properties that they like, again, and they would want the secondary benefits of being able to stay at those properties when they aren't booked up, right? Do they get more benefit if they decide to increase the fraction that they're purchasing, or how does that end up working?
Yes. So the percentage that you have access to the property during our blackout dates, it's kind of like an airline frequent flyer type of model, is directly correlated with your level of investment.
Right. Yeah. Now, that's really cool. Part of why I wanted to reach out and have this conversation with you is, my wife, who's also a real estate broker in addition to her day job, she specializes in a unique property in New York City called the Phillips Club, which is a fractional condominium. Right. So you buy an eighth of a share in that condo and then you use it like a hotel. So it actually seems like that your founder had, may have either heard of that or heard of some of the other fractional ownership type organizations and sort of learned from that. I mean, obviously you've got fractional jets, you've got fractional boats, right? And now there's fractional Airbnb. So it's really interesting to sort of have had you explain the journey that you guys are going through in simultaneously marketing the investment in the properties and the investment in the company, sort of in tandem. Have you sort of chosen to sort of lead with one message over the other, or how are you deciding to do that?
Yeah, so that's one thing. I think our focus recently and, since the beginning has been on who are going to be our super fans. There's, a lot of people in marketing talk about, especially in the startup world, who are your first 1,000 super fans? And what we found is that people who are going to invest in the company, it's an $1,000 minimum, but we have people investing, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but people who feel so compelled by our mission and what we're doing to actually put in $1,000 to invest in the future of the company, those are really our first super fans. They're so invested in what we're doing. They want to feel connected directly to our mission, to our executive team, to every single thing that we're doing. They want to provide recommendations to us, and that's so valuable to us. So we have been leading with number one, the company level fundraising, because we believe that those people who are investing with us as shareholders will directly also want to become investors in the individual properties. So it creates this very kind of virtuous cycle of, your shareholder is also your consumer, and then they're also going to be the guest. And then future guests at our Airbnbs will maybe also want to start investing in them. Someone walks into a property and they're like, there's a sign that says, hey, would you like to own, a stake in this property? There's so much opportunity for these stakeholders. Kind of the more you empower them to be part of different parts of the company and different parts of our offering.
Right. Yeah, that does actually, immediately, obviously, I think about being in your role in marketing to those kinds of super fans, and how would you find them, especially early on, right, when you don't have a lot of data, right? So, social media and the ability to target, for example, fans of Airbnb, and then layer on additional targeting methodologies, it would seem that you might be able to actually really cherry pick out the kinds of folks who would become super fans, who could end up, having the net worth, having the capital, and having the passion for traveling and the passion for investment at the same time. So I must have ended up in that filter that you were using, because I ended up seeing your ad. So I've certainly invested in many things over the years. I instead of course clicking the invest now, I said, all right, I got to talk to Christine about this and figure out what's going on. So which marketing channels are you most excited about, as you go through the launch?
Yeah. I mean, I think generally right now, what's performing for us is, like you said, we're able to target, two very specific personas, or I guess you could say three. One is people who are familiar investing in early stage companies, familiar with this kind of crowdfunding, that is, relatively easy to target. Then you have people who you want, and I think that maybe the video that you saw, the parody video that we made, it actually went viral. We got 1 million views. But then you have people who should know about equity crowdfunding, about Regulation A, that they can invest in these early stage companies, those who are investing in crypto, NFTs, all of these different things. How can we also promote the opportunity for them to invest in these kind of very early stage, high growth opportunities, and also diversify their assets into real estate? That's kind of another audience where this would be interesting to them from multiple angles, both real estate and kind of the new investment opportunity. And then the third one is this kind of Airbnb persona. So that person who may not be the most savvy investor, but they love to travel. They understand the value of Airbnb. If you ask them if they would like to own their own Airbnb or vacation property one day, the answer would be immediately yes. And I think that's something really interesting that we see, parts of our company, parts of our message resonate with people for completely different reasons.
Right.
And that's such an exciting, opportunity for us to have, especially on different social media channels. I think Reddit is a very interesting one. It was very instrumental in that video getting the traction that it did. Reddit is one we definitely want to experiment with more, want to understand more. I think the community aspect of Reddit, you don't want to abuse that, but I think it also is so powerful to be able to connect with people within certain niches, very passionate about different subjects that are relevant to us. I think one other one that we're excited about, we haven't done much with, is actually SMS. So, if you think about the juxtaposition between SMS and email marketing, SMS is very personal. And you give out your phone number, it's a very personal thing as opposed to just giving out your junk email. So if you can get to the point where you have people excited, bought in, to the point where they want to provide you their phone number, my friends, and some people who work here, they get texts from P. Diddy, and it's like a highlight of their day every day. I said earlier, people are investing in us because they want to feel like they have direct access to our team. So I think SMS is a huge opportunity to communicate in real time with people, to personalize messages. And what, we've seen recently in our initial research on it is it actually has a 209% higher response rate than email. So I think kind of these more personal ways of communicating are becoming more and more interesting to us because, brands, and especially our brand, is very personified to people. So they can feel like they're texting us. Our brand is almost a person. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there as well.
Yeah, there are some new startups in the SMS marketing category, like I think Community is one of them. I think it's called Community, that really have demonstrated the fact that while the permission relationship hurdle is much higher, getting the person to sort of give up that permission to text them, once you have them, as long as you're keeping them engaged, the response rate is just off the charts, comparatively speaking. So the trick is to have a value proposition that's strong enough that people will actually give you that permission relationship. It's an interesting time, obviously, for your startup because the pandemic, and as it's evolving from a pandemic into an endemic, has still continued to be a headwind for travel. And the potential inflationary pressures might end up resulting in changes in interest rates, right? So you guys are in a really interesting position, both as it relates to real estate and as it relates to travel and Airbnb usage. Do you think that's ended up being a positive for you guys, or do you think it's become a headwind for you?
Yeah, I think, what we've seen is I think there are a lot of younger generations now, more and more, because they've had the time, they've had the focus, they had the stimulus checks, who have been experimenting more and more with their personal investments, educating themselves, seeking out information more and more. I think that was a big benefit of the pandemic, specifically to different fintech investing platforms. I think we're benefiting from that. In terms of travel, I think if this were a year ago, we were still a little wary of it, about how things would unwind. But what we're actually seeing is that the pandemic has only furthered the trajectory that digital hospitality, traditional hospitality, people were already shifting away from hotels. Now they are even more. It's only accelerated that transition, the future of remote work, these digital nomads. Airbnb CEO actually recently said they're short, I think 2 million, or it's a few million homes. Like they don't have enough supply to meet demand. So that's actually opened up a huge opportunity for us because, they were founded on the ethos of local community, local culture, mom and pop hosts. They own the experience, but now they have this huge dilemma of, okay, we need millions more hosts, millions more properties. So they need, and you have, guests who are demanding a more consistent experience. So I feel like we're kind of in the happy medium because we're allowing people in the communities, the people who are passionate about those areas, to own stakes in these properties, as opposed to just, being a large private equity firm who's buying thousands of properties and putting them on Airbnb. So I feel like it has created a lot of opportunity with us as it's furthered kind of the Airbnb industry itself.
Great. My next question is relating to sort of getting your marketing message across. When you've got sort of a highly emotional category like travel and investing, both of which are pretty high emotion triggers, storytelling ends up being an important part of getting the message across. So have you been thinking about storytelling? Clearly, you were able to successfully use storytelling in a video in a particular way, right? But that trying to recreate that and get the same level of viral traction time after time is going to be a challenge for you and the team, right? So how are you thinking about storytelling, and how are you thinking about using it? Do you think you'll want to sort of have a command and control methodology, or would you like to empower, for example, celebrities or influencers to help you storytell?
Yeah. I think, in today's day and age, and this is really what our brand is built around, is it is built around a story that has, I think it's important to keep some core parts of a brand story the same and know what can evolve or what you can provide the opportunity to others to build upon as you create a community. So I really do think, being a narrative driven company is more important than ever. Starting with that as your foundation and having that strong story, but then also building it so that other people can see themselves in it. Brands nowadays, a lot of the ones that we think about, especially B2C brands, social media, digital marketing brands, they really are their community. It's less about what the brand started as, and their community that they've built on that foundation has become the brand. And I think that that is what is so important, is empowering the individual narratives, the individual stories of your community, to kind of further, your own progress. So one thing we're really thinking about, yes, we are thinking about influencers, but we're actually going to be more focused on quality over quantity. We're also thinking about how do we empower, our investors, our shareholders who are coming in to become our influencers, to become our micro influencers. I think the power of network effects is so important. And I think that all starts with a narrative, of the brand, of the people who participate in it, of the people in the company. So I think it's empowering all these little narratives to kind of flourish. And we have a lot of different strategies that we're looking at to do that.
Well, I certainly look forward to watching you guys continue to experiment in that category. It's a hot category, finding the perfect balance between sort of nano influencer, micro influencer, all the way up to, A-listers, right? Because the old school methodology was the spokesperson, which was purely A-lister, right? And now, obviously, a lot of brands have really been able to get the micro and nano influencers to build particularly strong brands because they're so passionate about it. So do you feel like you'll allow that to occur sort of on whichever platforms those individuals feel comfortable? Because obviously now there's, a half dozen or more major platforms from, Snap and Insta and TikTok and Facebook, right? Each has their own demographic, each has their own sort of best practices. Have you sort of thought about trying to harness that differently for the different platforms?
Yeah. And I think what we've found is we've focused platform to platform. So we've focused on influencers or micro influencers, whoever they are, who specialize in that specific platform. I think, again, it's kind of quality over quantity in that same sense. And I think you also have to empower the influencer, whoever you're working with, to make the content. You have to be there to be a guiding hand, but they know their audience best. I think a lot of the, number one, the big celebrity spokespeople, they're hard to get nowadays. They're obviously extremely expensive. It's like the Wild West out there when it comes to the influencer industry. It's very hard, whether you're a startup like us or a big brand, to figure out what you're doing. But the big celebrities, I think the issue that you run into there is authenticity. People, I don't know that people buy it anymore. Like that influencer is recommending that for any reason other than, the check. So I think that's why focusing on authenticity, allowing influencers to create the content that they know will resonate with their audience on the platform that they want to create it on. And doing it that way is much more effective than, just trying to get the people with the most amount of followers on the most number of platforms, et cetera.
Great. How often do you revisit your strategy? Is it very agile, very nimble? Because obviously the bigger, older brands, they're lucky if they think about it annually. It seems like from the way you were talking that you're actually sort of revisiting things pretty frequently with regards to making sure you have the right strategy in place.
Yeah, we are. I think, again, it kind of comes back to I think this is where a lot of startups make the mistake, is they're too much of a chameleon, where they'll jump to make big changes too quickly just because of, one insight that comes through. I think it's important to have, especially when you're scaling at the rate that we're scaling, it's important to have that core foundation in place and actually allow for channels of feedback to come through in specific areas. So for example, now that we have 11,000 shareholders now in our pipeline from all over the world, and we're creating systems to allow them to provide feedback. And that's actually influencing our app and our product and what they want to see. So I think you have to ask for feedback where you want it and also know what's working. That brand that we created is what is bringing in 11,000 people. So we shouldn't just, be comfortable changing it on a whim. So I think that's why it's so important, especially as a startup, to take time to figure out what foundation you're going to build on, to figure out your brand strategy, who you are, and also understand where you're going to be okay flexing that and being more agile. When it comes to big brands, I don't think it's too late for a lot of them to kind of relook at their strategies. I think a lot of that comes through, I think actually a great example is Abercrombie. They have kind of risen from the ashes in the past years. And I think a lot of that is because they opened up those channels of communication with their consumers, and those consumers and even their employees have become their micro influencers. Instead of using models, they're using their employees, or they're using, their biggest super fans. And I think that has made them so much more authentic, across all social media and digital platforms. And that is one of the biggest things that's turned them around. So I think the more you open up channels of communication in a constructive way, rather than, just allowing anything to come at you, any feedback, anytime, the more you can innovate your own strategy and be open to new opportunities.
Yeah, I'm really, you feel very comfortable with giving creative freedom to influencers and to essentially, as well as to customers who are going to potentially become influencers or micro influencers. So for those sort of more stodgy marketing folks, maybe from a different generation than yours, how would you recommend they think about, moving from this command and control mentality that they've had about their brand for many years to empowering the community to sort of run with the brand, right? And authentically, even potentially transition the brand. I mean, over the years, there have been brands that suddenly had their target market completely change, right? Without any involvement whatsoever. I mean, I'm dating myself now, but Tommy Hilfiger did not start out as the brand that they became, right? They ended up having an entire, group of individuals decide that Tommy Hilfiger was going to be their brand, and they were like, "What happened?" Right? And so for those marketers at sort of a more stodgy, less agile company, for them to sort of prepare them for maybe making their own transitions, what would you recommend? How should they think about it to make themselves comfortable with empowering influencers, micro influencers, and customers to become their voice?
Yeah, and this is where, in my past role, I worked for an innovation consultancy firm that was based in London. That's where, I did study marketing. I never thought I would be a CMO. I'm much more strategic and entrepreneurial. And so what I was actually doing there was I was working with major corporations like L Brands, Victoria's Secret, all the way to supply chain logistics companies and children's hospitals, to help them innovate, to help them think about customer value propositions differently, and then to actually bring in startups to work with them and facilitate them working together to innovate. So that was more in the innovation space, but that's why I kind of look at things from a much more strategic lens. So I wouldn't immediately jump and say, change everything overnight. I think in today's day and age, a lot of big companies feel pressured to make really, really drastic changes quickly. I think it can be more incremental. And the sooner you start, the better. I think the most important thing is to just start listening. You have to open up communication channels to just start sensing what is happening. Your customers closer than they've ever been before. And, if you're not listening to them and you're not sensing what opportunities or what they want of you, someone else will cater to those needs. And, that's what I saw at my previous job. We were bringing in the disruptors to work with the disrupted. But you just have to start sensing those opportunities. You have to start communicating with them. It doesn't have to be complicated, but you just have to find ways to start bringing that listening forward, whether that's through, social media monitoring, focus groups, all those things are very traditional, but they don't have to be. There are a lot of softwares, technologies out there that allow you to create these personas of who's out there and who's talking about you and what they're saying. So you just have to open up those feedback loops, start listening. And I think you'll get more and more comfortable with what you're hearing and more comfortable with the opportunities that your customers are presenting to you. Don't look at them as, just change. I would look at it as opportunities to innovate your business, to cater better to those customers. And I think everyone would be pleasantly surprised.
That's great advice. Thanks. We talked about authenticity, and one other area where there isn't always the level of authenticity that we would all want is in the areas of corporate social responsibility, CSR, or corporate philanthropy. And you sort of indicated that folks are sort of have the BS meter, right, where they can sort of see whether something's legit or authentic or not. And so, do you have any thoughts around, because you've had your own sort of social impact initiatives entrepreneurially yourself? So, given the fact that you've sort of got a foot in both of those camps, what recommendations would you have for brands who are sort of feeling the pressure to add purpose and social impact to their initiatives, but they want to make sure it comes off authentic, they want to make sure it comes off legitimate? How should they be thinking about that?
Yeah, I think the best social impact initiatives out there aren't just social impact initiatives. I think where it will seem authentic, and I don't think consumers nowadays are naive. I think what is most authentic is something that also has a business strategy connected to it. And I think that, can be a controversial opinion, maybe not. But for example, at reAlpha, we are building something called the Reimagine Fund. So obviously real estate, Airbnbs, lots of turnover, flipping houses. There's a ton operationally that goes into that, and there's a labor shortage. But I think that presents an opportunity. So what we did was we created something called the Reimagine Fund, where we are taking from the money that our shareholders, give us and invest in us. It's a perk for them. 2% of their investment will go to the Reimagine Fund. What that will do is we're partnering with workforce opportunity services, veterans programs, things like that, to actually hire people from veterans programs, to train them, to provide them education, to learn a trade, to then give them the seed capital to start their own business, to hire people to be the managers, and then their first contracts with reAlpha. So I don't think, social responsibility has to just be for show. I think it can always tie back to a business use case and something productive. And I think that actually is what has the most potential for impact in the long run as well, on the business and on the community. So that's just one example of what we're doing here. But, I would encourage you to think about, again, how you can listen to your consumers about what they're passionate about, find ways for them to participate in what you're doing, as opposed to, just doing something just to say that you did it. I think the more you encourage participation and strategy behind the impact initiative, the better.
Yeah, I would agree with you. We ran a really fun test under Giving Forward last year, where we empowered the customers of a sponsor to decide where the corporate philanthropy would go, essentially with a voting system. And the response from the customers was just huge, because they're like, "Oh, this is much better than you guys just deciding where the money should go."
It sounds like you're talking about a DAO. So that's something nowadays, if you're a super innovative company, you want to try something differently, a DAO is something that is super interesting for the future of corporate social responsibility. So for those of you who don't know, go ahead and look it up. But.
Yeah, DAOs are fascinating. They're, their lack of corporate structure. I think we're sort of all waiting for there to be a little bit more stability on that side. I was actually deciding whether to turn the e-marketing association into a DAO.
Wow.
Because I don't know if you've ever been involved in clubs or associations, but there's always like a mismatch, right, between the people who work the hardest to do an event or to do whatever versus the benefit that comes out of running a conference or an event or a webinar or whatever. And so DAOs, the structure of DAOs perfectly allows you to align the benefit that the people receive with the effort that they put in. But they're not quite ready for prime time, at least from my perspective, to be able to, replace a corporate structure with a DAO. But I'm watching it really carefully, because it is fascinating to watch. So
and I think that just goes back to simplify it. Just allow your customers to tell you what they're passionate about, to help you make the decision of what you're going to invest in when it comes to social impact. I think that really just opens up so much opportunity to, number one, connect with your customers, but also, fully form long-term strategies that will stick, as opposed to just, throwing money at a social impact initiative.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for joining me and for sharing your journey so far. Hopefully a lot of folks will be much clearer on what you guys are up to and take out their checkbooks as a result.
Yes. And, anyone reach out to me anytime. We love talking about reAlpha and everything we're doing. And thanks so much for having us, Kevin.
My pleasure.
I think I'm going to have to do a persona analysis of you later, since we targeted you so well.
I don't fit easily into any category. Thanks again.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in the Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.